Okay, so as mentioned in last video, what I want to ultimately do is have a grid of rooms, maybe 9, to where I start in the center and I want to be able to travel to a room above me, below me, to the side, and to the left. Let me go to Photoshop and we'll kind of show you what that looks like. So I want to be able to start here in the center and then have a door that loads the zone to this room over here, have a door above me that opens up this room, and each one of these rooms has a door into another room. So we're essentially creating a 2D grid. So we need to change our table in such a way that it reflects a 2D grid and then change how we're indexing into that. Much like how we had to index into the collision map with like an X and then Y times width, we're going to do the same thing here. To speed things up, I have created some rooms. So I have 9 rooms. And quickly, to show you what all those look like, they're basically just the same room but with doors on either side. And I've added all the collision data for each one of those rooms. So let's just kind of quickly load. So this is room, oh, nope, sorry. Let me save that. So this is room 0, so it's the top left room with only the door on the bottom and right. Then we have the next room over. It has doors on either side and one on the bottom. If I was to load just the center room, which is the lobby, that would look like this with doors on either side, and there's 9 of those. So we need to change some stuff to add a loading zone to the top and then change our trigger points because I've moved the doors. Let me reset that to room 0. Okay, so first let's set up our table into a 2D grid. So room 2. I'm just going to speed this up by adding another cursor real quick. Okay, so direct byte, room, 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 and then this is 3. This one is lobby. This one is 5. This one is 6, 7, 8. So this is our 2D grid, and we want to initialize our player into the lobby, which is 0, 1 in the X direction, and then 0, 1 in the Y direction. So it's X1, Y1 is this lobby. And let's do the same thing to the high bytes real quick. Okay, so let's add that to how we index into our room. So now we're going to have an X room index and a Y room index. That is there. And now we need to change how we're altering this because we only had room index in our code before. So let's jump to room index and change it. So when we load room, this is actually going to change to jump to subroutine calculate room index. We'll write that in a second. But what this essentially does is sets X for indexing into rooms table. Let's go to the next room index. So okay, when we're loading a previous room, we're decrementing the X index. So we need to decrement the X room index. And we're loading the next room, we're increasing the X direction as well. So X room index. When we load collision, we need to again calculate our index in the grid. So jump to subroutine, calculate room index. And again, this is setting X with player position in the world. So they're X and Y. Okay, so now we need to write this calculate room index function. Let's just go up here above load room, just make some space. So what do we have to do? Calculate room index. Okay, so this is doing that formula where it's x plus y times width. Currently our width is set to 3, so it's going to be x plus y times 3. Now, multiplication is a bit tricky in assembly. I'm going to cheat for now. I'm not going to do proper multiplication. I'm just going to add y 3 amount of times. This actually may change in the future, so rather than hard coding 3 down here, let's just establish a constant for now. And this is room grid width. And for now it is 3. All right, let's go to calculate here. So what do we have to do? Let's do this y times 3 first, because at the very end of this we're loading the x register as our output, so I don't want to waste the x register if we need to use it for a counter first to do this y times 3 business. So first I'm just going to load x with 0 as a counter, and then we'll make a loop. So calc room index loop. Oh, before we do this, what are we doing? We're loading our x, y positions. So we're calculating y first. So load A with y room index. We're going to store that temporarily into a variable that we've already put in our RAM before because we used it for collision detection. And this is essentially y times 1. This y times 1 happened already. And we need to do this 2 additional times to make y times 3. So we're going to load temp, clear the carry, add with carry, the index value, so y room index. So adding it a second time, this has become y times 2. And we have to do it one more time. So we are going to check our width constant that we just created. So we increment x, compare x with room grid width minus 1. Now, why is it minus 1? And this is a value, $sign. So when we loaded the room index, this is y times 1. We stored it in this like little loop format, so we're adding the room index again, and that's y times 2. We increment the index, we compare it. This needs to be the value 2, although we're doing y times 3. I know it's a bit confusing. It's just y times 1 already happened. So this is now room grid width minus 1. And now we break if not equal, back up to the loop, calc loop. And then the A register is now loaded with this y times 3. So when escape loop A equals y times 3, width. And now we can add x. So now we just have to clear the carry, add with carry, the x room index. And now we load the x register with that. So this is adding x, and this is loading x for indexing. All right, so this should calculate the proper room index, and then we index into the table we've created, and that should load the proper thing. Let's add in setup our player's XY position real quick. So we are going to load the value of 1 into X room index, as well as the Y room index, because it's X1, Y1. And this is initializing player position into lobby. Let's just see if that worked. Illegal instruction 136. Oh, our little formula that we wrote down. And nothing happened. So let's see what went wrong. We're stuck in a loop. We didn't return from subroutine after the calculate room index. Okay, so we didn't get quite there. We're in room 3 at the moment. And then the other one would have been correct. So we either messed up our calculation or messed up something else. Pretty sure it's the calculation. So what happened? So we loaded the Y room index, stored it into temp. We loaded temp, cleared the carry, added with carry. Oh, and we didn't restore it back into temp. So add with carry, store A back into temp, because it goes in a loop and we have to keep track of our progress. Okay, so now we're in the lobby, so that should have worked. Okay, so now we index into the rooms, and it should index into the left run. Yes, so you can see these doors disappearing as we're indexing. Now, I don't have a loading zone on the very top, and we've now ignored our collision because we're not loading it properly anymore. So let's do the same thing with the collision real quick. So I have all these collisions down here. Let's build up this table. This is collision map 2. Let's copy this 2 more times to make a grid and change these values properly. So this is 3, this is 4, this is 5, this is 8, this is 7, this is 6. Let's do the same for the high byte. Let's change the signs to the high byte sign. Okay, so now we can do the same with the index. Where are we loading collision? So let's find out where we're loading the collision real quick. Load collision. Okay, so load collision. That is its own function, which you know what we can do now? Let's combine it with our load room function, because every time we load a room, we have to load collision anyway. So it makes no sense to have this JSR load collision, JSR load room, when in reality it's just every time you load a room, you're also loading collision. So let's remove this. Put it into load room, and after we've calculated our index, bam, load collision. And first I want to make sure that loading collision didn't upset the X register. So if we exit, we still need to index into these rooms properly. So where is load collision actually? So load collision, calculate room index, collision table, data. Okay, so it didn't use the X register other than to index. So we can remove this. Where else is load collision? We don't need it here anymore because it's inside load room. And let's see if this works. Okay, so I have collision here, and these doors should now have collision. Okay, awesome. That door has a collision, and now this door has collision. So we've indexed into the collision maps correctly now, and now we need to move our... Oh, this is actually one tile off. I'm going to ignore that for now. We'll fix it later. Let's reset our loading zones to this position on screen. So I'm going to find out where my X position is. Oops, wrong window. So let's find out what position is moving in RAM. Okay, so X equals 10 is our left-hand side. So load previous room. Where's our check load zone left? So this is going to be 10. Compare with 10. And what is our right-hand side going to be? Going to traversing over here. It's going to be E8 now, not F8. We've moved some tiles over. E8. And now when we reset player, I don't want to reset behind where the door is, so let's change that. Reset player left. Let's reset to 10. And reset right, go to E8. So now this loading zone should be back active. And it is. The left one works, and we can traverse these rooms. Okay, so now let's work on the top and bottom. So these collision locations are a bit low, and I think this bottom one is off too. No, this bottom one is fine. Let's just lower our collision, or sorry, raise the collision up 1. So that's only going to happen on the lower portions, not the very top rooms. So that one is fixed, this one is fixed. These doorways are a 2x2. I accidentally just did a 2x1 in my collision. So just quickly fix that. Fix this. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, that should have fixed the collision at the top. Yes, and it has. Make sure the collision is fine on the bottom, and yes it is. So now let's add loading zones to these top portions. Loading zones. So check load zone. Okay, so here's our check loading zones. Let's add an upper and a lower. So check load zone up, and then a check load zone down. So now we're going to be referencing the player Y position. And we have to now worry about... No, we don't have to worry about offsets. Let's just grab raw numbers from our RAM and use those. So when I'm at the very top, what is my Y location? So let's look at RAM. And we'll look at the player Y position. It is 17 by the looks. Let me just double check. Yes, so 17 is our upper. So we're loading player Y, pause. We're comparing it with 17. We're going to break if it is not equal to the end of the subroutine. Otherwise, we're going to load upper room. Load upper room. That's a jump to subroutine. And now we do the same thing to the bottom. Let's find our Y position at the bottom loading zone. So that's CF. So we load A, player Y, pause, compare it with CF. Break if it's not equal to the end of the subroutine. Otherwise, we jump to a subroutine called load lower room. Okay, now we need to write these load lower room functions. So this load previous, all it really did was decrement the X index and then reset the player, and then it did all this other stuff. So let's kind of tack more onto this. So load lower room, it's going to increment the Y position, Y room index. We're going to JSR reset player up because we're resetting him to the top of the screen if we've gone down into the lower loading zone. And then we're going to jump to plus. And now we want to load upper room. We decrement Y room index. Jump to subroutine. Reset player down because we're resetting him to the bottom of the screen if we're going into the upper room, and then jump to plus. So all these are just jumping to this plus mark down here to do the rest of this change name table, turn off screen, and load room. So let's quickly just write these reset player up and reset player down. I'm going to see where I wrote all the other ones and kind of keep it a little put together. So reset players are located down here. So reset player right, and I did the same thing. I did a whole jump to plus, so let's continue that. Reset player up. And what was that top value? I think it was 17, so 17 in CF. Yeah. So load A with the value 17. And then jump to plus. And then reset, I misspelled reset. It's gonna bite me later. So reset player down. And that was CF. So load A, the value CF, jump to plus. Now let's check for errors and actually see if this worked. No errors. Moment of truth. Okay, so load zone up doesn't work. Load zone down doesn't work. So we need to call this when we're actually traveling down. We're not checking it. Same as last video. So let's find move player up. Move player up. And at the very end, JSR check load zone up. Check load. Is that what I called it? Yes, check load zone up, check load zone down. Okay, so move player up and now move player down is going to check that load zone. JSR, check load zone down. So now those load zones should be active. Okay, I reset the player very weirdly. That was a glitch. So the X location is being reset as well. I don't know why that happened. Let's go back to reset player. So reset player up, jump to plus. Reset player down, reset player right. Let's go to this. Oh, I'm storing into the X position still. So this stacking system isn't going to work. Let's branch this off to the Y's and then the X's. So we're going to add another plus here. And this doesn't need to be a jump. And we're going to store in player Y pause and return from subroutine. That should have fixed the glitch. Bam. And now we have collision up here, so there's no more loading zone. Now we can traverse amongst all these rooms. Let's go to this bottom one. And all this collision should be loaded correctly. Like if I was to go to this lower loading zone, it doesn't exist. Let's go back to the lobby. Bam. All this is loading zones. And this right edge should have correct collision loaded. So awesome. We have our little 2D grid. We just had to change a bit on how we're storing all these rooms in sort of a 2D way, and then use that x plus y times width to index into it, because it's literally a 1D array, but we're treating it like a 2D grid. That's all for this one. I'm going to think of something to do next, and I will see you in another video. Bye.